in the Capitol working with the state government, especially whenever, there's, I guess technically there's bipartisanship because you got a Republican governor with a Democratic mayor and more of a liberal thinking atmosphere such as Austin. How does that work? Speaking of leadership, I mean, how do you get things accomplished and how much interaction between the two, and working with, I guess, entities such as textile, like you mentioned, and other things like that when building the infrastructure?
Well, so, good news, bad news is the Texas sort of governance, the Texas Constitution that is arcane, antiquated, written in 1876, never envisioned cities, let alone, the mega cities and urbanization that now exist in Texas. Good news, bad news is that it's pretty segregated or segmented, I guess, between what the state does, what counties do, what school districts do over here, what healthcare districts do over here, and then what cities do down here. So good news, bad news is there doesn't have to be a whole lot of coordination between cities, particularly Austin, and state government. The reality, the pragmatic reality is the governance is very, very different. The makeup, politically and otherwise, of the leadership is very, very different. I've heard our governor describe Austin as 200 square miles surrounded by reality. I've heard Al Gore describe Austin from a partisan standpoint as being a blueberry in a big bowl of tomato soup from the whole blue-red state. So the city leadership, I would suggest because of the city citizenry is very different than the state. And the state is known as being a very conservative place. Austin, for the most part, isn't that. Can be in a positive way and all that. But so the good news is there's significant segmentation between what the state tries to do as a government, what counties try to do, what school districts try to do, what cities try to do. But the bad news is there's because of that there are no synergies. If anything, there's some duplication of effort. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of the whole concept of unfunded mandates that ultimately get passed, down. They're the feds, the states, the counties of the cities, or even schools. So it's an inefficient, sort of structural form of government in this state, which isn't uncommon in the South at least. But I guess the good news about that is it doesn't require there to be a whole lot of interaction. Now, I know the governor well. We're friendly and jog together numerous times, kind of thing. But if the mayor of Austin and the governor of Texas really had to, come up with some consensus on something that really that affected local governance, zoning or land use or transportation or public health care or potholes or streetlights, policing, it would be challenging. And so the slight caveat of all of this is we're the capital city of Texas, of course. So by constitution, the state leadership all have to live in Austin. So if you're from Dallas or Houston or Beaumont or Corpus or Texarkana or El Paso, and you get elected, land commissioner or governor or lieutenant governor or attorney general, well, guess what? You have to, by law, move to Austin. And so they do. And they find Austin to be this very, very different city than probably where they came from, in other parts of the state. And so it ends up making for this sort of challenging, unofficial dynamic. Because they, like you, they read our newspapers, they see our local newscast, so they see the Austin, right? They see the Austin dynamic, the Austin coverage, the Austin stuff, like it or not. And, I don't begrudge them, but they probably don't like it. And so, you're probably, you get elected statewide in the state, sorry, you're probably a relatively conservative person. And so you're you're an oil and gas guy from Houston, or you're a, rancher from West Texas, and you probably have a different mindset than I would suggest most of our citizenry. Yet you have this very high-profile leadership position in the state. You're forced to move to this city, in theory, pay some taxes to, this local government, sales tax, and some property tax, and, parking meters and stuff like that. And you probably really, really, really don't like what you see happening on the local scene. So it makes for a different dynamic between Austin and the state government, far more so than the Dallas city government has with the state, or the Corpus Christi or Beaumont or Lufkin or anybody else has. The fact that they live here, they watch our daily newscasts and read our daily newspaper, and so there's a lot of unofficial oversight by state leaders that other cities don't have to deal with. At the same time, I think it's just such a fundamental advantage of Austin to be the state capital. Between the economic impact of having 50,000 state jobs here, to just the whole civic pride and prowess of getting to be the state capital of this big, powerful, scheme of things, very wealthy state. But it makes for funny, interesting, sort of dynamics.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. On a side note, how was it, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. How was it living with Jeff Ward on the airway?
So, for those of you who don't know, so Jeff Ward has an afternoon drive time radio talk show, call-in talk show, KLPJ, AM 590. And I like Jeff a lot personally, and he and I socialized a little bit together. He's not even conservative. He would characterize himself as very libertarian, and which Austin has a lot of. Austin can be as libertarian as it is liberal, and so Jeff is this very outspoken, smart as hell, articulate, libertarian voice that thinks, only as a last resort should you have government kind of thing. Which I respect, because it's not where I come from politically. But I think this show is entertaining as can be, and I find myself listening to it all the time. If I'm in my car at that time of day, and a local politician can learn a lot from just listening to the show. Worst case is learn what naysayers are saying about what you're trying to do with government, probably. But at the same time, you can't help it, but probably pick up a few good points about living in Austin. Jeff lived here most of his life, has a neat history here. I'm glad he's in town. So if you haven't listened to the Jeff Ward show, do. If you ever call in and say that Mayor Will Wynn told you to call in to the Jeff Ward show. Remember some questions. So, more questions?
I've got questions.
First question, how do you feel people's almost irrational fears of governmental debt will undermine your environmental initiatives you in your term?
Well, there's a specific issue of government debt, which one has to be cognizant of, but there's also just the sort of broader issue about the cost of environmental stewardship. And so, as mayor, I sort of proudly promoted a lot of environmental causes, knowing good and well that from a raw economic standpoint, at least the way the current analysis is generally had, they look like they don't pay for themselves. One could always make the question, well, how much would you pay for clean water or clean air, our society has done a really bad job of sort of truth in advertising and in having, the actual cost of lifestyles apparent to consumers. Simple examples are, the cost of gasoline at the gas pump. Many of us who drive a fair amount, gripe about paying $3 a gallon for gasoline, but in no way does that $3 include what I would characterize as the real cost of me, driving around in a, in a car, burning gasoline or diesel, whatever I might be burning at the time. When it comes to air quality, when it comes to public health, so for instance, we don't, as consumers, at $3 a gallon, we don't pay the shared cost in the billions of dollars that the Defense Department spends policing the shipping lanes between the Middle East oil fields and the refineries, mostly, many of them in the Houston area. So that's not at the pump. That cost, in theory, is in our federal tax returns, is in our federal tax rate, is somehow in our federal debt, right? But you don't see that as a consumer when you're putting gasoline in the car, just like you don't see the cost of the local healthcare district dealing with ozone action days when there's a 25% spike in childhood asthma attacks and the number of kids in the ER that day is higher than it was the day before when it wasn't an ozone action day. And the ozone is caused by, low ozone is caused disproportionately by the exhaust from our cars, right? That comes from burning the gasoline. So at $3 a gallon, you're not paying that cost either. So there's not this, there's not the real cost of things like electricity or gasoline or manufacturing. And so I was always prepared to try to have that argument or try to have that expanded analysis. But I will say it's very, very difficult when you have tough economic times, when you have really tight city budgets, and you want to expand your recycling program that from that shallow cost-benefit analysis doesn't pay for itself, right? I mean, the city of Austin spends more money picking up recycling than and trying to resell, those elements of the aluminum and the paper and all that, the plastics, than if we just didn't do it. Technically, our solid waste department would have a slightly smaller budget if we just threw everything into landfill. On recycling, at least, some people just sort of, intuitively can figure out, well, you're right, but there's got to be some cost benefit. There's got to be some advantageous outcome by having less natural resources consumed somewhere, whether it's a strip mine or deforestation or just manufacturing exhaust or burning foreign fossil fuels to fuel the facility that creates the plastic, to begin with. And so, so it's just that concept of trying to figure out how do we, in a fair way, a very, accurate way, how do you deepen